This podcast is for educational purposes only, does not constitute legal advice, and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you need legal assistance about a legal problem, contact an attorney.
Welcome back to Know Your Regulator, the podcast that inspires you to engage. I am your host, Simone Murphy. And as we wrap up this year, I wanted to showcase not just the best clips of Know Your Regulator from 2025, but really the story of what we learned across our most popular episodes that educate license holders about how licensing risks actually show up in real life. The overall theme that we saw wasn't these gotcha type of mistakes. It was really that smart professionals get blindsided when they move too fast inside a system that they don't fully understand.
The licensing board is really more analogous to a law enforcement agency. I mean, they're really not there looking out for you, the licensee. They're looking out for the public.
That mindset shift alone should change how you respond. And it's why this show exists, right? So we can help you understand what kind of impact that the moves that you make have on your license, especially early on in any type of process with your regulatory agency.
So if someone just makes a mistake and something is inadvertent and they didn't intend to do, yeah, that would not be a violation of the criminal law.
And that's the other big lens we kept returning to, how investigators and agencies actually evaluate conduct.
You have to understand that your license is part of your livelihood. You rely on your license to, to feed your families and your children and to live and pay your mortgage. It allows you to practice in the area that you work so hard to obtain, to go to school and to obtain a license in. Again, be mindful, stay professional, and more importantly, know the boundaries that your board expects you to uphold.
So here are the most popular Know Your Regulator lessons from this past year. We've got insights from our expert guests to help explain each one. Our first big takeaway is that the process is the plot, right? What I mean by that is people get in trouble when they respond emotionally. They assume that they have a valid enough reason or that it's good enough, or they don't follow the steps or even understand the process that they've just entered into. It can be a really dangerous territory.
Don't make a career decision in the heat of the moment. Don't make that knee-jerk reaction. If you're burned out or frustrated or you're dealing with personal issues, step back, take a breath before you resign, know the rules, document your situation and get guidance before you act or react.
And that's not just for teachers. That is universal advice for all licensed professionals across all industries. Every agency has a process, right? When you know what it is, you don't have to guess. Guessing in a situation where your license and your livelihood are on the line can rarely lead to a successful outcome. You want to make sure that you have that clarity beforehand.
In a nutshell, here's how it works. Complaint comes in, it gets assigned to an investigator. The investigator is first going to look at it to see, does it even, just on its face, does it allege facts that would constitute a violation? If it doesn't, then it gets flushed immediately. We just go ahead and dismiss it.
And that is the key. Once you know the pipeline, you can respond strategically without adrenaline or aggression or high emotions, right? Let your attorney be the aggressor. They can handle the situation with far less emotion and still make your points and your voice heard. Our second biggest takeaway is that intention is not always protection. You can have the greatest intentions and they may not protect you. Evidence is what will protect you, and evidence is what will hold up. It's so incredibly important. We see a lot of license holders assume that their reason is valid, that their heart is in the right place, they should be good. But the boards and the agencies, they don't evaluate your heart. They evaluate the steps, your proof, the evidence that you need, and then they match that up against criteria that they need you to satisfy.
SBEC isn't looking at your heart. They're looking at whether you follow the rules and whether your situation is supported by the evidence and the documentation that you're supposed to be gathering. And you might be leaving for a completely valid reason, but it's not documented or it's outside the approved exceptions or categories. And you're still at risk for those, potential sanctions that are out there.
And that's a tough truth for a lot of people, I know. It's also empowering. If you look at it this way, it tells you what to focus on, right? So you know the criteria that you need to satisfy, and you can use that advice to your advantage and make sure that you have that documentation, those timelines, a clean record of what happened. You've got the facts and the evidence to back it up. This year, we also learned the difference between an honest mistake and that conduct finding often comes down to how intent is defined. How does your board or agency define intent?
A nurse has rights. You shouldn't be responding to something your lawyer's going to ask for your full and complete file. You shouldn't be just outright writing things when you don't even know all the evidence. So that's why you lean into your legal team.
So don't assume that boards will understand or that they will see it your way. Build a response that can be proven with credible evidence that focuses on facts. And be sure to be careful on what you say. Make sure it's only what the board is asking for. You don't want to give them too little information and not answer their questions, but you also don't want to give them too much information, potentially open yourself up to another violation. Our next lesson, and maybe the hardest for some of our big hearted folks out there, is the modern boundary problem. The fastest way that you can create a risk to your license right now is casual communication and engaging in social media content like exchanging text messages, DMs, consequential rants and posts, and going live at work. That last one is huge. Going live at work has consequences, especially when you're a licensed professional.
I always tell people, I'm like, don't text, stay off social media with your client. I'm not saying you don't need to have a Facebook page for friends and family and, goofy stuff that you want to do, but I see more, I'm telling you right now, text messaging and social media is like a slippery slope, greased with axle grease. I just see almost nothing good come about of it whenever people start doing that.
And we saw in healthcare that got especially sharp this year because what feels like just creating content or just taking a video can turn into evidence that can lead into sanctions.
So it would roll onto the investigator's desk in some form of a link to a video and an email, or because traditionally I would get a folder and have to open up the folder. But like you said, in the evolving day and age, for the investigator as well, that would more likely than not be a link to a video, whatever platform. It doesn't matter whether it's LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram, or it doesn't matter where this is generating from. You're just video on your own phone. It's just not appropriate at all. It's the epitome of unprofessional conduct.
And that's what most people don't realize is it doesn't stay online drama. It doesn't stay online. It becomes a part of your file. It becomes evidence that the board can see.
People take for granted that it will be a verbal name that is possibly said. We write names, or there could be abbreviations of names, and people like, that's not a big deal, but it is, because people can place you at your job and Sally Sue your neighbor at the job the same time that you were there, and all of a sudden their name is on a board, and then there's a diagnosis in the background, and they can put those two letters together with when you were working, and then when they, do you see what I mean?
Really, the major takeaway here with the modern boundary is not to just never use social media. That's unrealistic. It's prevalent in our everyday life. The takeaway is not to confuse public platforms with a private space, especially when you're a licensed professional and especially while you are on the clock at work. And our last lesson from this year is that even when the complaint ends, the ripple effects on your financial and professional life can linger. We talked about hidden lawsuits where the risk isn't always the sanction from your board or your agency. It's really what happens after the case has closed, and it may not even be immediate.
I like to call them ripple effects. You have the incident. The incident may not have been that much. Maybe it gets resolved. The board says, hey, no problem, keep your license. But the financial side is going to linger much, much longer than the legal side. And so let's say that there was an issue. Let's say you go in front of the board, there's discovery done. There may even be start of a trial. There's discovery done. And what happens later on if somebody, for example, you have a patient that had an issue and they sue, but there's another patient or the daughter of another patient who turns around and says, that's funny. That was my mom's doctor. and this wasn't good. I'm going to check into this. And so that becomes a serious issue where, we had the main incident and now it's rippling out and it's going further and further. And so when you talk about a judgment against you, it'll attach to real property. We already mentioned, it can come after income. They can garnish wages. I told you about brokerage accounts. They'll grab your brokerage account for you.
That's the part that people really underestimate, is that this can reach into income, assets, and create some extreme stress that you didn't plan for.
Another big one that I don't think many people think about is it can affect you personally in your career. Like all of a sudden, if you own your own building, or let's say you're a doctor and you have your own buildings, well, now you might have problems with public records showing the creditor, like, no, you're high risk. I'm not going to give you a loan. And that becomes a huge problem when it comes to refinancing. Public records can restrict your employment. Like, sorry, we know what happened. We're not hiring you. You're at risk for it. Quite often, it will delay your credentialing. You may have an issue that, hey, the board resolved, but this other, professional licensing says, well, wait a minute, we need to check into this as well. And then you're sitting there saying, well, what am I supposed to do here? And so it ripples out from the get-go, and people just don't expect it. They think, hey, it's a one-time thing. I beat it. I'm done. But that's not always the case.
So when we say your license is your livelihood, we really mean it, literally. We have seen when consequences spill way past the board's final order, and there is very little you can do at that time to protect yourself. All of the protection happens preemptively. So you need to make sure that you're protecting yourself and your livelihood as a licensed individual. So if I can leave you with one takeaway from this year, it's to slow down and get clarity. Stop making those knee-jerk reactions, those aggressive, emotional responses, and take some time to understand the process of your agency or board. A rushed, casual, I'll do it later response can really cause some major problems. Thanks for tuning in to Know Your Regulator this year, as we focused on turning confusion into clarity for Texas license holders and helping protect their license, livelihood, and peace of mind. Until next year, stay inspired and continue engaging with your regulatory agency.
Know Your Regulator, the podcast that inspires you to engage.